The house was asleep when I heard her whisper my name to someone else, not out loud. Not the way lovers do. It slipped through the crack beneath the study door at 12:47 a.m., thin as a blade. I was supposed to be in the shower. Steam still fogged the mirror upstairs. I hadn't meant to stop. I hadn't meant to listen. But some instincts never die. I stood barefoot on the cold tile, towel still around my waist, pulse already slowing instead of racing. That's how I knew something was wrong. Fear spikes the heart. Training stills it. Her voice was soft, playful, familiar in a way it hadn't been with me for months. "Tomorrow," she said. A pause, a quiet laugh. "Yes, he's clueless." I leaned closer to the door, not breathing. Another pause. Then the words that rearranged my internal organs without making a sound. "Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." No panic followed, no disbelief. Just a clean, internal click, as if a long-ignored mechanism finally locked into place. She kept talking. I stopped listening, because in that moment, I understood something far more dangerous than betrayal. She thought I was weak. I stepped back before the floor could betray me, counted my steps, re-entered the bathroom, turned the shower back on, let the water erase my outline from the mirror. When I climbed into bed 10 minutes later, she was already there, curled against my side, breathing slow, practiced. I studied the ceiling in the dark and cataloged details the way I used to catalog rooftops and wind speed. Her phone wasn't on the nightstand. She never left it out anymore. She murmured something in her sleep and pressed closer, her hand resting over my chest, right above my heart. I wondered if she knew exactly where it was. I wondered how long she'd been planning my death. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye like nothing had happened. I watched her from the kitchen window as she backed out of the driveway, smiling, relaxed, certain. That certainty hurt more than the words. I poured coffee I didn't drink and replayed the night in fragments. Tone, timing, confidence. You don't ask for a hit unless you've already crossed several moral borders. You don't joke unless you believe the outcome is guaranteed. I had spent years constructing a version of myself designed to disappear. A quiet consultant, a husband who listened more than he spoke, a man with no sharp edges. She married that man. She cheated on him too. What she didn't marry, what she never suspected, was the part of me that had learned how to wait without hope, how to listen without reacting, how to dismantle threats without ever raising his voice. I didn't confront her. I didn't check her phone. Not yet. I made her breakfast. I smiled back. I kissed her forehead and told her to drive safe. Then I locked the door behind her and finally let the truth settle. This wasn't heartbreak. This was a hostile environment, and I had already survived worse. I didn't rush. That was the first mistake people always made, confusing urgency with importance. Panic leaves fingerprints. Precision doesn't. For 3 days, I played the role she expected. Predictable. Oblivious. I asked about her work. I laughed at the right moments. I let her complain about small things, traffic, co-workers, the neighbor's dog. She needed to believe I was still living on the surface. Inside, I was mapping the depth. At night, when she slept, I stayed awake, counting breaths, watching the subtle tension in her jaw even in rest. Guilt doesn't sleep peacefully. It naps. On the 4th day, I noticed her routine change. She took calls outside, long ones. She started wearing perfume again. Not for me. I hadn't commented on her scent in months. She was performing for someone else now. I let her. Instead of her phone, I studied patterns, times, durations, emotional residue. You can learn more from behavior than data, if you know how to read it. But I still gathered data. A burner number appeared on our shared phone bill. Unfamiliar, recurring, always after midnight. I memorized it instead of saving it. Muscle memory from a life she didn't know existed. I ran it through channels that don't leave traces. It belonged to a man who didn't exist on paper, but cast a very real shadow. No fixed address, no legitimate income. Connections to two private security contractors recently dissolved after internal investigations. Men who didn't steal. They erased. I exhaled slowly. So that's how she thought it would end. I began preparing contingencies the same way I used to prepare for long Overwatch missions. Quietly, methodically, without emotional interference. I installed cameras, not obvious ones. I didn't need footage for court. I needed timing. I needed confirmation. I watched her lie in high definition. Her smiles sharpened. Her lies grew efficient. She was good. Too good for a first affair. That told me this wasn't her first betrayal. Just the first one aimed at my throat. One night I asked casually, "Do you ever feel like people don't really know each other?" She stiffened for half a second. "Barely noticeable." "But I noticed." She laughed it off. "You're getting philosophical." I nodded. "Just thinking." What I didn't say was that I'd already verified the make and model of the vehicle scheduled to arrive on our street tomorrow night. I knew the names the men used when they thought no one was listening. I knew the angle they'd choose. I even knew how they'd explain my death to themselves. Clean job, easy money, no loose ends. They were wrong. I wasn't hunting her lover. I wasn't planning violence. I was doing something far more permanent. I was letting her walk confidently toward the moment where her illusion would collapse under its own weight, where every lie she'd stacked so carefully would finally fall inward. The trap wasn't for them, it was for her. The night she planned to erase me, I slept deeply. That alone should have terrified her. At 2:11 a.m., the motion sensor tripped, exactly where I knew it would. Two silhouettes moved with professional patience. No rush, no noise. Men who believed the world would never remember their faces. They never made it past the living room. Not because I stopped them, but because there was nothing to stop. The house was empty. I was already seated in a softly lit conference room 3 miles away, watching everything unfold on a silent monitor. Every step they took was logged. Every decision time-stamped. Their presence documented by systems far beyond their understanding. By morning, they would cease to exist in the ways that mattered. But she didn't know that yet. She came home at dawn, rehearsing shock in the car. I watched her through another feed as she stepped into the house and saw the mess. Drawers pulled, furniture displaced, the illusion of violence without the blood. She screamed on cue. An hour later, I walked in, alive, unharmed. Unsurprised, the color drained from her face so fast she had to sit down. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, from the sudden collapse of certainty. I handed her an envelope. Inside, call transcripts, timestamps, financial transfers, surveillance stills. Her midnight voice, clean, intimate, damning, transcribed in black ink. She didn't cry at first. She laughed. Then she begged. Then she tried anger. I waited. When she finally whispered, "Who are you?" I answered honestly, "Someone you should have never underestimated." I told her I knew about the affair, about the money, about the plan. I told her the men she hired were already explaining themselves to people who don't forgive or forget. I didn't threaten, I explained. That was worse. Her world narrowed to that room. Every future she imagined collapsed into a single point of irreversible truth. She had gambled everything on the belief that I was ordinary. I stood to leave. She reached for me, missed. By noon, her accounts were frozen. By evening, her lover vanished from her messages like he'd never existed. By nightfall, she was alone in a house that suddenly felt too quiet to survive in. I never spoke to her again. Some people call that revenge. I call it correction. I didn't win. I didn't heal. I simply removed myself from the lie and walked away with something she would never get back: control.